back in the 90s, whenever I was still a kid, most of my video game experience was actually not on consoles. While I did have quite a bit of stuff on the Nintendo 64 and the Sega Genesis, a lot of my primary video game experience came through Windows 98 operating systems and earlier IBM-compatible computers. As with most other things from my childhood, I just wasn't very good at taking care of things. I was an irresponsible child, so a lot of my collectible games and big box PC stuff, it just ended up disappearing over time, and I didn't know where any of it went. That was until recently, actually. I can largely thank my own parents for helping with this. One day while they were renovating the house, they decided to clean out the attic as well, and they found an old compact printer box that used to go along with our compact Presario computer. Funny enough, that's where I played all these old games, and inside the printer box was a bunch of the old games themselves. Some of them were not complete, the condition varied depending on each of the games, but the fact that they were mostly intact was astounding to me. It was great to see a bunch of things that in today's gaming world would be considered legacy formats, like CDs and floppy disks. Everything's transitioned to the digital world where you can download everything. It's a heck of a lot more convenient, and it allows you a direct pipeline to developers so they can put out patches and hotfixes so your games won't break. A lot of these older stuff, they don't work very well on modern machines. We'll get to that shortly. Now back onto my personal story. Some of the games that I found in that big old dusty box was from a franchise that I think everyone has came across at least once in their lifetime. Lego. These days, Lego is pretty well known for their collectathon style games where you go around, bash enemies, and pick up bricks and other pieces. But back then, they were a little bit more experimental in my mind. They had quite a few different games that expanded through different genres and different styles. I'm not a quote-unquote Lego maniac, but I do have quite a few of the games, and I might review more of these in the future. But first, let's go ahead and start with this one, Lego Loco, a Lego-themed train simulation game from 1998. So here's the box itself. It's nothing really special. It does have this nice, really cool embossed print of the logo and all the stuff on the front, and it's also got quite a few stickers that I find funny. I'm glad that I kept these because these are really cool for nostalgia's sake. Like this one up here in the upper right corner that says new for $19.99, and down here on the left-hand side we've got free 2-year subscription to the Lego Mania magazine. By mail, see details inside. I actually find that to be really neat because I used to be subscribed to the Lego Mania magazine as a kid. Here's some of the various covers over the years from especially around this particular era. Now back onto the box, it's your standard big box PC game. It allows you to flip open the cover. It's got screenshots and various other taglines to get you hooked and interested, like design the ultimate railroad and unlimited track building potential. Turn your desktop PC into an interactive rail system with multiple trains, carriages, and unlimited track building potential. With Lego Loco, you can create your own interactive environment by naming and interacting with your favorite minifigures in your Lego community. Expand your system by using the large toolbox to add pre-built models along your railway system. Plus, select from multiple backgrounds like a forest or a desert environment and customize your Lego community by adding trees and bushes. Lego Loco provides hours of fun by placing you in control and command of your own railroad system. Yeah, I wish it was that easy. You remember what I said about compatibility issues, right? Unfortunately, this is just one of those games that in the modern era, it is completely filled with these issues. I had to go through so many different ways to attempt to install it, and whenever I finally did get it installed, it still runs very awkwardly. So allow me to detail you the process that I went through here. The first thing, of course, was I decided to just go and throw caution to the wind. I have a Windows 10 operating system on a full-fledged gaming PC. I didn't expect it to run out of the gate, but I figured why not just go ahead and try to get it running natively. Boy, was I wrong. I could not get it to install. The installer just would not pop up whatsoever. Every time I just tried to get it going, it just would not go. So my first instinct beyond that was just to copy over the files and drop them on the desktop and try to launch it from there. I did find a lot of the assets, like a bunch of sprites and logos, and even a video file, a raw video file from the intro of the game in those folders. But beyond that, it would not run, so I had to go search for another option as well. I know it's generally not a recommended way to approach retro PC gaming, but my next instinct was, okay, let's just go ahead and get a virtual machine going on my desktop. So I went out, got an ISO for Windows 98, decided to try to install it, and that wouldn't go either, because the way this game runs is it has to be in a minimum of 800 by 600 with 16-bit true color on your PC. And as it stands, the software I was using, VirtualBox, does not allow you to change the resolution beyond 640 by 480, at least easily. There's some various ways you can finagle around and get it to do it, but it was just too much work for me to really try to bother with it because there was no guarantee it was going to run well anyway beyond that as well. At least on the bright side, I got to be greeted with some virtual nostalgia. I got to see the old Welcome to Windows 98 startup screen. But that said, I ended up finding myself back at the drawing board, so then I went on to my next idea. And that was to bust out my family's old junky E-Machines computer. By today's standards, this thing's pretty much garbage, and it's seen a lot of mileage. It's worse for wear. It's a little nostalgic for me, though. A lot of my first early YouTube videos were done on this computer, so I was like, well, why not come back and visit it, and we'll do Lego Loco on it. No. See, the problem here is that OBS did not accept the old NVIDIA graphics card that is in it, and Fraps bogged down to pretty much a sluggish stop. And at this point, I didn't want to show you guys nothing but just a slideshow of the video game, so I was about to basically scrap this project. That was until I came back and decided to just give it one more shot on my desktop downstairs. All of a sudden, it installs. It's not the greatest experience, and you'll see why. It's heavily laden with glitches, and it doesn't function nearly as it should, because there's just so much artifacting and glitches that go on, but it works. And it pretty much just thrusts you into the game. There's not really too much of a tutorial or an explanation of anything, really. I mean, whenever you click on the toy box up there, you have your little friend come out and explain things to you, but other than that, it's not really hand-holding in any sort of way. All the tutorials are handled by this conductor man who basically speaks some dialect of what I would expect to be Simlish, and you can also see some of the graphical issues that I'm already starting to experience. It gets worse. One of the biggest questions I think facing this game as an adult is, why would you ever want to play this? There's no real challenge whatsoever, no construction costs, no budget, no nothing. It doesn't have any sort of economy that puts any difficulties. There's no construction waiting times. Your infrastructure is, I guess, the biggest challenge you have, but even then, that's extremely simple considering that you don't have any real repercussions. You can crash trains and nothing happens in this game. All they do is they crash and then they just back up. So basically at this point you're probably thinking, well, what do I do? What is the point of this game? The answer is postcards. You create as many postcards as you want, and you can send them around the world to people like Santa, the Martians, or the Loch Ness Monster. And then they'll send a postcard back to you, and that's about it. It's a card. It's basically, you make something that looks like it was done in Microsoft Paint, you wait, and some AI sends you some preformed cards that were basically also made in Microsoft Paint, but they look better so you feel bad about yourself. So where does that basically leave us at this point? Well, I mean, the only other feature that's here, besides the ones that you've seen about customizing your world and sending snail mail to cryptids around the world, if you happen to have some friends like you that are stuck in the early 2000s, you can use TCP networking to set up your own little server and send back and forth basically the world's slowest but most interactive version of instant messaging. So basically beyond this point, this game's just not really viable for any solo adult players. There's no reason to really play it other than its charm, and that really is shallow as can be. It has some quirky humor and stuff that was very typical of LEGO back in the 90s and early 2000s. But, I mean, if you want to do that, go play Lego Island. That game is still pretty bad too, though. It has not aged very well. But this doesn't even have the nostalgia factor that Lego Island did. Lego Island, everybody knew that one. This one, not so much. Plus, I cannot state how much of a pain this was to try to get working whenever you lack sufficient hardware from the time and place. If you're running basically anything past Windows 7, it's going to be a very, very tough uphill battle. So basically at this point, if you want something that's modern and a little bit more palatable to the idea of creating your own world and stuff like that in a LEGO universe, I would wholeheartedly recommend something like LEGO Worlds. It's basically the same kind of principle except much more expanded upon, and it's not nearly as focused on just trains. It's basically the whole world as a concept. From what I understand, Lego Creator would also be pretty similar to an older, more retro version of Lego Worlds, but I'm not even sure I have the disc for that one. I have the box. I'll have to go check and see if I can find that one, and maybe I'll come back and do a review of that one in due time. In conclusion, stay away from Lego Loco. It's not really worth your time unless you're into collecting big box PC games and you want to put it on a shelf with a bunch of other Lego games, but fundamentally it's basically very much for children, and it has no real depth to it whatsoever, especially in today's modern gaming world. Regardless of my opinion of the game in today's world, I'd like to thank the defunct developer Intelligent Games for still giving me a good piece of my childhood.